Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking Mustafa İslamoğlu's profound, yet often misunderstood, concept of Rub. So what exactly connects a mosquito's complex anatomy, the sun's nuclear fusion, and destructive atomic weapons? Just look at the data. With nearly 1,000 mentions, Rub is literally the second most frequent divine name. You know, this concept actually frames the entire text, appearing in both the first and last revelations. This signifies Rububiyet, basically a divine nurturing that gives everything its core nature and ultimate purpose. Misunderstanding this creates a huge divide, treating knowledge as a sacred trust versus just owning it like property. Think about Pharaoh. He claimed to be the ultimate Rub just to assert absolute ownership over the earth. When modern science adopts that arrogant ownership mindset, well, that leads straight to destructive things like atomic bombs. Grammatically, the word Rab never uses the definitive article. That means it's always relational and incredibly personal. So, you might wonder, why does the text constantly use personal phrases like my Rab or your Rab? It's an invitation to actually internalize that divine nurturing, reflecting it in how you love the world. Let's look at micro-design. A single mosquito features over 100 eyes, 48 teeth, and built-in local anesthesia. It has 2 lung-like hearts connected to its wings, letting them beat a crazy 500 times per second. It bypasses human defenses using a chemical scalpel, drinking 8 times its body weight without bursting. Wild, right? Even this tiny insect perfectly executes its Rububiyet, a quick reminder that our temporary world isn't paradise. Okay, let's zoom out to the macro scale and observe the blazing sun's eternal fiery purpose. If the sun burned fossil fuels like we do on Earth, it would have literally died out instantly. Instead, it burns via nuclear fusion, perfectly guided by its Rab to provide us constant heat and light. This brilliantly illustrates Moses' answer to Pharaoh. The divine gave absolutely everything its nature and expertly guided it. So if both the sun and mosquito perfectly follow their divine purpose, how are you using your knowledge? Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely fascinating historical, theological, and linguistic mystery hidden right inside one of the most studied texts in human history, the Quran. Specifically, we're taking a closer look at the famous concept of the 99 names of God. Now, if you grew up around this tradition, or honestly, even if you've just seen the beautiful calligraphy hanging on a wall somewhere, you've likely heard of these names. But what if I told you that there is a massive, glaring omission in the most famous historical lists of these names? An omission so huge, it actually completely changes how we understand the text's core message. Okay, to really wrap our heads around the scale of this mystery, we've got to look at one specific, incredibly important number, 962. Within the source text, there's a specific divine attribute, a name, that is mentioned exactly 962 times. That incredible frequency makes it the second most used name for God in the entire book, second only to the name Allah itself. It's practically a cornerstone of the text's theology. So that brings us to the core question here. The name we're talking about is Rab, which is traditionally translated as Lord, Sustainer, or Nurturer. Despite popping up 962 times, the name Rab is completely absent from the 2 most famous traditional 99 name lists compiled by classical scholars Tirmizi and Ibn Maseh. Think about that for a second. How on earth could the second most prominent name be totally left out? Especially when you realize those traditional lists actually include 26 names that don't even appear in the original text at all. Part 1. By the numbers, the prominence of Rab. Just think about the sheer volume for a moment. The name Allah is used 2,697 times, but Rab comes in as a really strong second, with 962 occurrences. Our source analysis points out that the statistical dominance of Rab essentially proves that its absence from those famous 99 name lists means those lists were later human additions. They aren't a definitive, original reflection of the text itself. The text is practically screaming the importance of this specific name. And you know, it's not just about how many times it's used, it's about where it's used. Rub is the very first attribute mentioned in the very first chronological revelation. Read in the name of your Rub. And if you look at the compiled text, the very last word of the very last chapter is also Rub. It perfectly frames the entire message. The source suggests that this frames the whole text not just as a rulebook, but as a journey of divine education. So what does this word actually mean in practice? Well, we have to define Rububiyet, which is the state of being a Rab. Our source material emphasizes that this isn't just some static title, like a king sitting far away on a throne. It's an active, ongoing process of divine nurturing, sustaining, and bringing things to their ultimate purpose. The text implies that the very reason revelation exists is because of this nurturing quality. It's the ultimate educational tool from a sustainer to its creation.
Part 2, the grammar of intimacy, a personal connection. Now here is where it gets really fascinating. There's this brilliant linguistic quirk regarding how this word is actually used in the text. This is where the grammar reveals a profound psychological and spiritual layer. In Arabic, you usually put the definite article al, meaning the, in front of a title. But the word rub is never used with a generic the in the entire text. It never says the rub. Instead, it appears hundreds of times in a possessive, deeply intimate form. Over 240 times it's Rabbuk, or your Lord, and 178 times it's Rabbi, or Rabbuna, meaning my Lord or our Lord. The grammar itself demands a personal relationship. It's asking the reader to internalize this nurturing presence. It's asking the reader to adopt my lordship, the text essentially says, and it will manifest within you.
And this perfectly illustrates that level of intimacy. Just consider the contrast for a second. The phrase, O Lord, or Ya Rab, uses a prefix of calling out, almost like you're shouting across a crowded room. This phrase is only used twice in all 962 occurrences, and both times it's used to express deep complaint and sorrow about the afterlife. Why? Because the source notes that saying "oh" implies distance or distraction. You yell "oh" to someone far away or someone who is asleep. But the text insists the creator is closer than your own jugular vein, always awake and deeply near. Hence, my Lord, 178 times. Part 3. The conflict over lordship, stewardship versus ownership. So what actually happens when humanity decides to reject this intimate connection? Historically, classical civilizations from Andalusia to Baghdad to Samarkand treated scientific discovery as uncovering the art of the Rab. Knowledge was a sacred trust, an ime. You respected the sustainer of the materials you were studying. But when you remove the sustainer from the equation, you replace stewardship with ownership. Knowledge simply becomes property. Because when humanity views knowledge purely as owned property, unchecked by any higher accountability to a nurturer, well, the consequences are pretty terrifying. The source points out that this mindset makes it incredibly easy to justify creating weapons of mass destruction. You suddenly feel entitled to engineer bugs that wipe out entire forests, or to weaponize microscopic pathogens just to destroy your enemies. Because you view yourself as the absolute owner, the rub of the material, you completely lose the moral guardrails of stewardship. Part 4. Masterpieces of divine design, the micro and the macro. To really see how this sustainer concept actually guides the physical world around us, let's look at something tiny, something kind of annoying actually, a mosquito. The source notes that God is not ashamed to use a mosquito as a profound example. And when you look at its biology, it's a microscopic masterpiece. A mosquito is equipped with 4 sensory laboratories analyzing heat, tone, movement, and light. It has over 100 eyes, arranged like a honeycomb, an intricate mouth with 48 teeth acting like tiny surgical scalpels, and 3 hearts, 1 main heart, and 2 specifically dedicated just to powering its wings. And its feeding process? It is literally an unbelievably complex surgical strike. Before it even cuts into you, it injects a local anesthesia, which, by the way, is exactly why you don't feel it until it's already done and laughing at you from the ceiling. It then secretes an anticoagulant to stop your body's natural defense system from clotting the blood. Finally, it sucks up to 8 times its own body weight in blood without bursting. For a human, that would be the equivalent of chugging 200 liters of water. And to power this incredible biological machine, those wings, driven by their own dedicated hearts, remember, flap at a staggering 500 times per second. The source highlights this sheer mechanical power by noting a simple, crazy comparison. If human joints were forced to flap our arms 500 times a second, the sheer force would snap our arms off completely. It is divine design engineered at the absolute smallest possible scale. All right, let's zoom all the way out from the micro to the macro scale. The source compares the energy that powers the Earth, carbonic fire, or fossil fuels, with the energy that powers the sun, which is nuclear fusion. This highlights the sustainer's absolute mastery on a cosmic scale, giving entirely different creations vastly different physical laws to achieve their unique purpose. To really grasp the scale of the sun's design, think about this for a second. If the sun were a massive ball of fossil fuels, if it burned with the same carbonic fire we use right here on Earth, the source points out it would have burned itself out in 1/3 billionth of its current lifespan.
Instead, it has burned for billions of years without shrinking, precisely because it was given a unique physical law, nuclear fusion, by its rub, specifically engineered to sustain life on our planet. Part 5, the ultimate nurturer, purpose and guidance. So bringing it all together, what does it fundamentally mean to be the rub of a mosquito, the sun, and humanity? The most profound definition actually comes from a legendary dialogue in the text between Moses and Pharaoh. When Pharaoh asks, "Who is your Lord?" Moses replies with this incredible quote, "Our Lord is he who gave each thing its form and nature, then guided it." That is the essence of the rub. It's the entity that embeds a specific purpose, a khilqa, into every single creation, equips it with the exact tools it needs, whether that's a mosquito's 48 teeth or the sun's nuclear fusion, and then actively guides it to fulfillment. For us as humans, this macro guidance often translates into what we experience in our daily lives as trials. Just like a mother disciplines a child out of love, or a doctor performs a painful surgery to heal a patient, the divine nurturer uses both blessings and hardships to shape us. The source uses a brilliant modern analogy here. Think of Olympic athletes. We applaud them for enduring 10 to 12 hours a day of agonizing, grueling training, completely breaking their bodies down just for a worldly medal. Divine trials, the text argues, are exactly that kind of intense training, but for an eternal spiritual medal. Which leaves us with this final, profound thought. If every atom, every insect, and every star is intricately designed and sustained for a specific purpose, then so are you. The whole concept of the rub is asking us to completely reframe our worldview. So I leave you with this. How will you perceive the trials, the disciplines, and the blessings that are actively nurturing your ultimate purpose today? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning and keep learning.
When you open up an ancient sacred text, you bring a certain set of expectations with you.
Yeah, definitely. We all do.
Right. You're bracing yourself for this sweeping theology. You anticipate grand moral decrees, cosmic rules, maybe a rigid list of thou shalts and thou shalt nots to govern society.
Exactly. You expect the voice of a very distant sovereign telling you what to do.
Yeah, because that is the traditional framework we bring to literally any religious scripture.
Mm-hmm. We look for the absolute, the macro, the high-level architecture of morality, I guess you could say.
Right. We want the big picture handed down directly from the mountaintop.
But, sometimes you stumble into a completely different way of reading those texts.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're doing today. A method where the most mind-bending revelations aren't found in the thunderous decrees. They're actually hiding in plain sight within the mundane details.
Which is such a wild concept when you really dig into it.
It really is. So I want you listening to just imagine for a second trying to understand the philosophical justification behind the invention of the atomic bomb.
Okay, heavy start.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Or trying to decode the psychological drive that makes an Olympic athlete willingly destroy their own body.
Right, which is also a huge leap.
Yeah, and this is where it gets truly bizarre, trying to comprehend the literal microscopic surgical anatomy of a mosquito.
It sounds like a totally chaotic list of non sequiturs.
It really does. But imagine that to understand all of those wildly disconnected things, you literally have to look at the exact grammatical structure of a single ancient word.
On the surface, connecting nuclear physics, elite sports, and entomology to ancient grammar just seems impossible.
I would have thought the exact same thing before we started digging into the material for today.
Yeah, it really flips your perspective.
It does. So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring a super fascinating lecture delivered by the theologian and linguist Mustafa İslamoğlu.
And our mission for you, listening right now, is to completely deconstruct one profoundly powerful word.
The word rab. It's an Arabic term universally translated into English as Lord or, sustainer.
Right.
But the central argument we're unpacking today is that misunderstanding or casually mistranslating this one tiny concept has fundamentally reshaped humanity's view of science.
Not just science, but our relationship with suffering and really how we interact with the natural world itself.
Exactly. And what makes this approach so compelling to me is that we are not going to start with broad, hazy assumptions about faith or theology.
No, we are starting with raw data.
Yes. We're looking at statistics, textual placement, and the bedrock architecture of the Arabic language to see how an entire worldview is built from the ground up.
Because before we can even begin to define what the word rab truly means, we have to look at the math.
And the numbers tell a story that genuinely threw me off guard when I first saw them.
They are pretty shocking.
So if you're familiar with traditional Islamic history or culture, there is a very famous concept that just permeates everything, right? The 99 names of Allah.
Right, you see these names printed on beautiful posters. People memorize them. They're recited in audio tracks.
Yeah, they are completely woven into the fabric of the culture.
And they are intended to be a comprehensive list of the divine attributes.
Right. And our material points out that in the primary text of the Quran itself, the proper noun Allah appears exactly 2,697 times.
2,697, which, firmly establishes Allah as the proper name, the central identifying noun of the divine.
Okay, let's unpack this. So if Allah is the proper name and we have this super widespread tradition of the 99 names, we should be looking for 99 attributes or descriptive titles that point back to that proper noun.
That's the logical assumption. Yeah.
Right. So when you run a simple textual analysis, what is the most frequently used attribute in the entire book?
By a massive margin, it is the word rab.
Yeah, it appears 962 times.
962.
To put that in perspective, that is roughly a third as often as the name Allah itself.
So, statistically speaking, it is the dominant descriptive characteristic of the divine in the text.
Right, it completely dwarfs almost every other attribute you could name. The merciful, the forgiving, the all-knowing. None of them come close to the sheer volume of the word rab.
Which is what makes this next piece of information feel like a glitch in the matrix, honestly.
Oh man, yeah. Because despite appearing 962 times in the primary text, the name Rab is completely missing from the two most famous historically accepted lists of those 99 names.
Completely missing.
I am talking about the definitive lists compiled by the classical scholars Tirmidhi and Ibn Majah.
The very lists that dictate all those posters hanging on living room walls around the world today.
I simply couldn't process this when I first read it. How is it functionally possible that the single most common descriptive name in the book is omitted from the official lists?
It's hard to wrap your head around.
It's like someone asking you to write down a list of the defining characteristics of the ocean and you somehow forget to include the word wet. It literally defies logic.
It does seem impossible. But İslamoğlu provides a specific historical and textual explanation for this glaring omission.
Okay, what is it?
Well, this absence proves, according to his analysis, that these specific historical lists found in the collections of Tirmidhi and Ibn Majah were what scholars of Hadith call mudraj.
Break that down for me. Mudraj means they were altered.
Not maliciously altered, no, but interpolated.
Okay.
It means they were later additions by narrators, not the original verbatim words of the prophet.
Ah, I see.
The argument is that early narrators, or later compilers, essentially made an earnest attempt to extract and list the names on their own to create a handy, standardized list for the public.
Right, like a quick reference guide.
Exactly. And in doing so, they relied on human memory or, categorical assumptions, and they somehow missed the most vital, statistically prevalent attribute of all.
Wow, it's a massive cautionary tale.
It really is.
If the primary text uses a word 962 times, and your traditional centuries-old list skips it entirely well, the list is fundamentally flawed, not the text.
Precisely. It highlights a critical principle in the study of any historical or religious text.
Right.
The absolute necessity of verifying traditional information against the primary source text.
The text itself has to be the anchor.
Always. And when you look closely at that anchor, the placement of the word rab reveals its unparalleled importance.
Because it isn't just scattered randomly across the chapters to hit a word count?
No, it's highly structural.
Yeah, if rab is the most used attribute, how does the text actually deploy it?
Well, it essentially acts as both the alpha and the omega of the entire Quranic experience.
Let's trace that timeline because it's fascinating. Historically, during the very first moments of the revelation process, the wahi, the very first attribute mentioned is rab.
The famous first command given in the cave of Hira.
Right, read in the name of your rab.
Notice the specificity there. It doesn't say read in the name of Allah or read in the name of the Creator.
Yeah, it specifically selects rab for the absolute first interaction between the divine and humanity.
And it anchors the other end, too.
Right. When you look at the physical compilation of the book as it exists today, the very last chapter, Surah An-Nas, closes the entire text.
And the final attribute mentioned in that physical book.
It is also Rab.
So this structural placement implies something really profound about the nature of the text. It begins with Rab and ends with Rab.
The entire message is enveloped in this one concept.
Exactly. So we really have to ask the obvious question. What does this word actually mean? Why is it the Alpha and the Omega?
Well, the default translation we usually hear in English is Lord.
Right, Lord of the Worlds.
But I have to admit, Lord carries a lot of medieval baggage for an English speaker, you know?
Oh, absolutely.
It evokes an image of a feudal king, a boss, a distant authority figure sitting on a throne, basically just collecting taxes and handing out arbitrary punishments to peasants.
Yeah, it paints a picture of static authority and dominance. A hierarchy based purely on power.
Exactly. But the lecture argues that this translation completely flattens and honestly neuters the active dynamic meaning of the Arabic concept of rububiyat.
Rububiyat, yeah. The definition provided here is wildly different from a feudal king.
It really is. It translates more to divine nurturing.
Right. It's the act of sustaining, disciplining, educating, and gradually raising something from its most basic, fragile state to its ultimate, highest potential.
I love that. Consider the difference between a king and a master gardener.
That's a great analogy.
Right. A king demands blind obedience to a set of static laws. If you break the law, you get punished. End of story.
Very transactional.
But a master gardener operates entirely differently. A gardener takes a seed, understands its specific internal potential, provides it with the exact amount of water and sunlight it needs, protects it from pests.
And crucially, prunes it when necessary.
Yes. Now, to the plant, pruning might seem violent or destructive.
Oh, sure. You're literally cutting parts of it off.
Right. But the gardener knows that cutting back the dead branches is the only way to guide the plant until it blossoms into exactly what it was designed to be.
And that active, continuous, deeply intimate process of cultivation is rububiyat.
It completely reframes the entire concept of religion for me.
How so?
Well, if the source material is claiming that the purpose of the revelation is an act of rububiyat, it means the text isn't just a divine monologue meant to show off cosmic knowledge.
Right. It's not just a textbook.
No, and it isn't just a list of demands from a boss. The divine is actively nurturing humanity through the text. The revelation itself is the water and the pruning shears.
What's fascinating here is that this is the core paradigm shift. If the divine's primary relationship to the universe was merely as a creator, someone who builds a machine, turns it on, and just walks away, there would be no logical need for revelation.
Because the machine will just run on its own.
Exactly. The fact that a revelation exists, that the divine is communicating at all, is the ultimate proof of rububiyat. It proves the creator is still involved, still guiding, still actively trying to bring humanity to its ultimate potential.
But history is littered with humans who really don't want to be nurtured.
No, we generally resist it.
Right, we want to be the ones doing the pruning. So what happens when a human being tries to usurp that specific role?
Well, that leads us directly into Islamoğlu's analysis of the Pharaoh complex.
Which has terrifying implications for how we view modern science, by the way.
Oh, absolutely terrifying.
So when we think of the Pharaoh from the story of Moses, the caricature we usually draw is of a megalomaniac who literally claimed to be the creator of the universe.
Right, the guy who thinks he made the sky.
But the material points out a really vital, subtle distinction. Pharaoh never actually claimed to have created the heavens and the earth.
I mean, he couldn't have. Everyone in his society knew he was born of a human mother. He bled, he aged.
Yeah, he was just a god.
Claiming to be the original, eternal creator of the cosmos would have been so absurd that even his most brainwashed followers would have just laughed at him.
So what was his specific flavor of arrogance?
The text quotes his exact claim.
Right. I am your greatest Rab.
Notice that. He wasn't trying to be the creator. He was trying to be the absolute master, the ultimate nurturer, the unquestioned authority over the earthly domain.
He wanted to be the sole force dictating the potential, the rules, and the boundaries of human life in his kingdom.
He wanted a total monopoly on rububiyat.
Yeah. He was essentially saying, the distant creator might have made the stars, but down here on the dirt, I am the one who feeds you, I am the one who disciplines you, I am your Rab.
Now connect this ancient pharaonic arrogance to broader trends in both ancient mythologies and modern Western philosophy.
Okay, yeah. The lecture brings up ancient Greek and Egyptian mythologies and draws a straight line from them to the modern philosophical concept of deism.
And deism is essentially the belief in a watchmaker god.
Right. The philosophical premise is that there is a supreme being who creates the universe, winds it up like a massive, complex clock, sets the physical laws in motion, and then just retires.
He steps back, folds his arms, and refuses to intervene in the daily operations of the cosmos.
And if God retires, well, that creates a massive power vacuum on Earth.
Exactly. And who is always eager to rush in and fill a power vacuum?
Humanity.
Yep. If we believe the Creator is distant and uninvolved, humans feel entirely justified in acting as the rab of the earth. We basically assign ourselves the role of absolute masters.
And this directly dictates our philosophy of science.
It dictates everything about it.
Because how you view your role on Earth completely changes how you interact with nature.
Right.
The material points out that during the periods when historical Islamic centers, places like Andalusia, Baghdad, Samarkand, Istanbul, when they were at the absolute peak of their scientific output, they operated under a very specific ethical paradigm.
They viewed nature and the knowledge they extracted from it as an eminent, a sacred trust.
Because they firmly believed the universe already had an active, involved rab.
Exactly. They didn't view themselves as the masters of nature. They were just guests, studying the artistry of the master gardener.
I was trying to wrap my head around this distinction, and I thought about the difference between renting a beautiful, fully furnished historical house versus buying it outright.
Okay, I like where this is going.
So if you rent a house and you view it as a trust from a landlord you respect, you might study the architecture, you might marvel at how the intricate plumbing works, you keep it clean, you preserve it.
Because it's not yours.
Exactly. But if you think you own it absolutely, if it is your unconditional property, you feel completely entitled to take a sledgehammer to the living room walls just to see what's behind the drywall.
That is a perfect encapsulation of the distinction between eminent, which is a trust, and mulkiyet, which means absolute property or ownership.
Right. And when modern scientific paradigms gradually stripped away the concept of an active, nurturing rab from the universe, the scientists didn't stop doing science.
No, science exploded. But the underlying nature and ethics of that science fundamentally changed.
Knowledge transitioned from being a sacred trust to being absolute property.
And when a species believes it owns nature absolutely, the results can be catastrophic.
Yeah, the lecture does not hold back on the grim realities of treating science as Mosquito.
Not at all.
When you lose respect for the inherent purpose given to nature by its true rab, you feel completely justified in manipulating it purely for dominance.
You feel intellectually and somehow morally justified in splitting the atom, not to provide clean energy to millions, but to engineer a bomb capable of instantly vaporizing entire cities.
The knowledge of physics becomes a tool of ultimate destruction.
Or take the example of bioweapons.
Oh man, yeah. Think about the audacity of taking a microbe that naturally exists in an ecosystem, bringing it into a laboratory, and aggressively mutating it specifically to turn it into a biological bomb designed to wipe out innocent civilian populations. Or the terrifying research into breeding genetically modified insects designed solely to eat and destroy the agricultural crops of a geopolitical enemy.
When you remove the rab, the ethical constraints on knowledge just simply vanish.
Poof, gone.
You no longer pause to ask, what is the inherent divine purpose of this atom or this microbe or this insect?
You only ask, how can I bend this biology to serve my own power?
It is the Pharaoh complex, digitized, synthesized, and weaponized.
It really is. So we have this terrifying historical tendency for humans to develop destructive arrogance when we try to be the absolute rab. How does the Quran actively try to prevent this in its readers? Like, how does it train a human mind to view its relationship with the divine so it doesn't inflate into a pharaoh complex?
He achieves this through a breathtaking masterclass in grammar.
Okay, I have to stop you here because I am not a grammarian.
Fair enough.
When I see the word grammar, my eyes usually just glaze over, but this linguistic fact completely hooked me.
It's pretty amazing.
Out of all 962 appearances of the word rab in the Quran, it is never, not a single time used with the Arabic definite article al.
Meaning it never appears in the text as al-rab. It is never simply the Lord.
Never. Instead, the lecture points out, it is always used as a mutaf.
Which is a possessed noun in a genitive construction.
Right, and that is exactly where you lose me again.
Let me explain.
Please, what is a genitive construction? Break that down for me like I'm 5. Why does this technical grammar term matter to my worldview?
Okay, in simple terms, a genitive construction means the word cannot exist in isolation.
Oh, okay.
It must be attached to a pronoun. It is a word that inherently demands a relationship. It signifies ownership or close association.
So it's the difference between saying the car and my car.
Exactly. The text uses rab 242 times as your rab, rabuka.
Wow, that's specific.
It uses it 243 times in plural forms like their rab or your rab when addressing a group. And it appears 178 times as my rab or our rab.
So why the absolute ban on just the rab?
Because saying the Lord creates a psychological distance. The Lord is an objective fact floating out there in the universe somewhere. It's like saying the president or the sun.
Right, you are acknowledging that the entity exists, but you aren't claiming any personal active connection to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But saying my Lord or your Lord forces intimacy. You cannot escape it.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. It's a divine demand for the listener sitting right there reading the text to internalize the relationship.
Yes.
The speaker in our material phrases it so beautifully. He says the text essentially commands the reader, wear my lordship like clothing, let it manifest in your cells, in your sight, in your love.
It's very poetic.
It's saying, do not just intellectually acknowledge that I am a nurturer out there in the cosmos. Internalize that I am constantly, intimately nurturing you.
And this loops right back to the Pharaoh complex.
Right. Because if you truly internalize that Rububiyet, if you genuinely believe you are constantly being nurtured, disciplined, and guided by a personal rab, you just cannot simultaneously harbor the arrogance of Pharaoh.
The sheer intimacy of the grammar destroys the ego required to abuse the natural world.
You realize you are the subject of the pruning, not the gardener.
But as with all rules, there is an exception, and the lecture points out one massive anomaly to this rule of intimacy.
And it has to do with how people call out in prayer.
The Ya-Rab anomaly. This is a fascinating piece of textual detective work.
If you spend time in any Middle Eastern culture, you hear people say Ya Rab constantly.
Constantly.
Oh Lord, it's incredibly common in modern speech. But the material points out that in the entire text of the Quran, the phrase Ya Rab is only used exactly 2 times.
2 times out of 962.
Out of 962 uses of the word Rab, only 2 use the calling word Ya. Why on earth is a phrase that is so common today so exceptionally rare in the primary text?
To understand the anomaly, we really have to understand the specific function of the vocative particle ya in classical Arabic.
Okay, lay it on me.
Ya translates to oh, but its functional use is highly specific. You use ya to call out to someone who is physically far away, someone who is asleep, or someone who is deeply distracted.
Like yelling hey to a friend across a loud, crowded room.
Precisely. You use it to bridge a gap, to forcefully grab the attention of someone who isn't currently focused on you.
Okay, but what is the core theological premise of the Quran regarding the divine?
It repeatedly states that the Rab is closer to a human being than their own jugular vein.
The Rab never slumbers, never sleeps, and is never distracted.
Therefore, grammatically and theologically, using a word designed to shout across a physical distance to a God who is already infinitely close is a contradiction.
You don't need to shout hey to someone who is intimately nurturing the very cells in your body.
Right, it implies a distance that shouldn't exist.
For you listening, just think about how profoundly that shifts the idea of prayer. You aren't shouting into the void trying to wake up a distant watchmaker.
No.
You are whispering to something closer than your own heartbeat.
It changes everything.
But that raises the obvious question. If shouting Ya Rab implies a flawed understanding of distance, why does the text use it those 2 times? Surah Furqan, verse 30, and Surah Zukhruf, verse 88.
Well, because those 2 instances are not standard prayers.
What are they?
When you look at the context, both verses are deep, agonizing complaints made in the afterlife by the prophet himself.
Oh, wow.
And who is he complaining about? He is mourning a society, his own people, who completely abandoned the message of the Quran.
And the material makes a really sharp, painful distinction here. He says these people didn't just throw the book in the trash.
No, the tragedy is infinitely more subtle and, sadly, common.
The Arabic words used to describe their abandonment aren't about physically discarding the object, right?
No. Islamoğlu explains that these are people who carried the book physically. They respected it as a sacred object.
They likely kissed it, they elevated it on the highest shelves in their homes.
They spent hours perfecting the intricate melodic rules of reciting it, the tajweed.
But they completely ignored what the words actually meant.
Yes, they rendered it functionally useless in their day-to-day lives.
They treated the book like a magical talisman to ward off bad luck, rather than a blueprint for moral living and spiritual growth.
And in that moment of profound, tragic realization in the afterlife, witnessing a population who possessed the ultimate tool for divine nurturing, but completely failed to internalize a single drop of it, the prophet uses the distant Ya Rab.
He uses the word of distance to reflect the immense emotional and spiritual chasm those people place between themselves and the truth, despite physically holding the book in their hands.
It is the ultimate manifestation of spiritual distance.
Wow. It's a grammatical expression of heartbreak.
It really is.
I want to pivot here because everything we've talked about so far sounds beautiful in theory.
God is a master gardener, intimately close, constantly nurturing us.
But I have to push back, and I think a lot of our listeners would too.
Naturally.
If this Rab is so deeply intimate, so focused on nurturing us to our highest potential, how do we reconcile that with the brutal reality of the world?
The problem of pain.
Yes, because reality is full of suffering, chronic pain, injustice, and a harsh discipline. If God is my personal nurturer, why does it hurt so much? Why the cancer? Why the car crashes?
It is the oldest and most difficult existential question humanity faces. If the master gardener is truly loving, why are the pruning shears so sharp?
Exactly.
The lecture tackles this head-on by explaining how Rububiyet, this divine nurturing, actually operates in the messy reality of life.
It challenges our assumption that nurturing must always equal comfort.
Right. He argues that sometimes nurturing is achieved through giving, and sometimes it is achieved through taking away. It's a highly dynamic, customized process.
He uses a fascinating thought experiment regarding a doctor and a patient to illustrate the unseen layers of Rububiyet.
It's a great example. We assume the standard dynamic, right? A person gets sick, God uses the medical expertise of a doctor to heal the patient.
That is a direct, positive manifestation of nurturing for the patient.
But İslamoğlu suggests that sometimes the dynamic is entirely inverted.
Meaning the doctor is the one being treated.
Exactly. Sometimes the extreme vulnerability, the profound patience, or even the sheer, unavoidable tragedy of a dying patient's condition is actually engineered by God to spiritually awaken, humble, and heal the doctor.
So you never truly know who is being prescribed to whom in the cosmic waiting room.
You really don't. The physical illness of one person might be the exact spiritual medicine required for another.
Nurturing is happening on multiple, overlapping, unseen levels simultaneously.
And because we only see the physical layer, we judge the event as a failure or a tragedy.
This brings us to what I found to be the most emotionally charged part of the material.
The section on disabled children.
Yeah. The speaker addresses a very sensitive, painful reality regarding this concept.
Right.
The existence of disabled children. And he is remarkably forceful, almost palpably angry, at a specific cultural narrative that surrounds these families.
He really takes aim at the toxic narrative that a child born with severe physical or mental disabilities is somehow a divine punishment inflicted upon the parents for some hidden, unconfessed sin.
He utterly incinerates that idea.
As he should.
He calls anyone who spreads that narrative blind and foul-mouthed, accusing them of being completely ignorant of the wisdom of the divine.
Because that cruel narrative reduces the profound, infinite complexity of Rububiyet into a petty transactional penal code.
It assumes that every difficulty on earth is a direct punishment for a specific crime.
Which completely contradicts the entire concept of a nurturing Rab who is actively trying to elevate a soul.
But if it's not a punishment, what is it? Because it is undeniably a massive, exhausting hardship.
The speaker reframes the challenge entirely.
He says that the child is not a punishment, but a key to paradise.
It is an ongoing, massive spiritual credit line for the parents.
By caring for that child, by demonstrating impossible patience year after year, by showing unconditional love in the face of sheer exhaustion, the parents are undergoing a rigorous, highly accelerated spiritual evolution.
In the grand eternal picture, the disabled child is the specific instrument chosen for their ultimate elevation.
It is a radical shift in perspective. It moves the human mind from asking, "Why is God punishing me?" to asking, How is this seemingly impossible situation precisely designed to stretch my soul and bring me to my highest potential?
It's beautiful, but it's hard.
Right, I get that intellectually, but I still struggle with it emotionally. It's easy for us to sit behind microphones and talk about spiritual elevation, but when you're waking up at 3 a.m. for the 5th time to care for a sick child, it feels like torture, not elevation.
Which perfectly sets up the analogy Islamolu uses to bridge that gap between intellectual understanding and physical reality.
The Olympic athlete analogy.
Yes.
This analogy blew my mind because it exposes our own hypocrisy regarding pain.
It really does. Think about what we ask elite, world-class athletes to do.
If you took an ordinary, average person walking down the street and you suddenly forced them to undergo the daily routine of an Olympic gymnast or a Tour de France cyclist.
You're talking about 6 to 12 hours of grueling, agonizing physical labor every single day.
You are talking about strict caloric deprivation, immense psychological pressure.
Constantly tearing muscle fibers, risking permanent joint and bone damage.
If you kidnapped a random person and subjected them to that routine against their will, the modern world would rightfully classify it as horrific, inhumane torture.
You would be brought before an international tribunal for human rights violation.
Absolutely. But because it is labeled sports, and crucially because the athlete consents to it and understands the goal, we don't call it torture.
No, we celebrate it. We put these people on the covers of magazines. We applaud their sacrifice.
We call it discipline. But why? Why do these athletes willingly endure what is objectively a form of prolonged physical torment?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, why do they do it? For a medal.
For a piece of metal hanging on a ribbon.
And maybe a few years of fleeting worldly fame.
And this is where the speaker drops the hammer.
Yeah.
If human beings are willing to subject themselves to such extreme, agonizing physical and mental destruction for a piece of metal that will eventually tarnish in a drawer.
How can believers complain to their rab about the spiritual discipline and hardship required to win an eternal medal in the afterlife?
Wow. It is a profound reality check on human psychology.
We readily accept pain. We even seek it out when we clearly understand the earthly goal. No pain, no gain.
Right, we accept that in the gym.
But we immediately cry injustice and question God's love when the pain is designed for an eternal, unseen goal.
The discipline of the rab is essentially the training camp for the soul.
It's all about the time horizon. The athlete is looking 4 years into the future at the next Olympics.
The believer is being asked to look into eternity.
Exactly. When the time horizon shifts to infinity, the temporary pain of the pruning shears takes on a completely different meaning.
Okay, so we've spent a lot of time on how Rab nurtures, disciplines, and guides humanity. But Rububiyet isn't just about human psychology, right? It's about the entire universe.
The macro and the micro.
How does this concept apply to the natural world? The material says the ultimate definition of this comes from a fascinating historical conversation between the prophet Moses and our old friend Pharaoh.
Yes. In the Quranic narrative, when Pharaoh smugly demands to know who this Rab is that Musa keeps talking about, Musa doesn't give a standard theological answer.
He doesn't just say he's the guy in the sky.
No, he delivers a definition that encompasses the entirety of existence.
Musa says that the Rab is the one who gives every single thing its inherent nature, its fundamental purpose. The Arabic words used are hilkat or fitra, and then, crucially, actively guides it to fulfill that potential.
Which is the act of tedbiryay.
Create the specific potential and then guide the object to realization.
That dual action is the hallmark of the Rab.
And Islamolu gives two jaw-dropping examples of this in action, one on a macro, cosmic scale, and one on a microscopic scale. Let's start with the macro. The sun.
The scale of the sun is almost incomprehensible to the human mind, and the lecture uses it to demonstrate that its existence and function are not random accidents of physics.
They are a highly guided purpose.
Yes. The material points out that the sun has been burning for billions of years, providing the exact amount of energy needed to sustain life on Earth without shrinking or diminishing in any noticeable way.
And he makes a really interesting scientific point here. If the sun were burning via carbon combustion, like a giant lump of coal or a campfire, which is how fire primarily works here on Earth, it would have consumed its entire massive bulk and burned out in a fraction of a second, given its immense energy output.
Right, because the Earth itself, which the lecture notes separated from the sun, is largely a carbon-based system. We live by burning carbon.
We are, as he phrases it, children of carbon.
But the sun doesn't burn carbon.
No, it operates via nuclear combustion, nuclear fusion. It is fusing hydrogen atoms into helium.
Why? Because its rab gave it a very specific nature, a specific hillcat.
Its divine command was to heat and illuminate for billions of years to sustain life on a rock millions of miles away.
And to fulfill that specific long-term purpose, it was guided testfarily to operate on nuclear physics, not carbon physics. It is following its divine programming flawlessly.
It's a beautiful, integrated way to look at astrophysics. The laws of physics are not random, arbitrary constraints. They are the physical manifestation of divine guidance, ensuring an object meets its intended, life-sustaining purpose.
But as massive and awe-inspiring as the sun is, the lecture spends significantly more time on the micro example.
And honestly, I could not stop thinking about this part.
You're talking about the mosquito.
The mosquito.
Yeah.
In Surah Baqarah, the Quran mentions a mosquito, noting that the divine is not ashamed to use such a tiny, seemingly insignificant creature as an example.
And İslamoğlu calls the mosquito a book published in a massive global campaign for all of humanity to read.
If you think about it, it's not a rare, limited edition text meant only for a few scholars hidden in a library somewhere.
No, it is mass distributed worldwide across every continent, specifically so no human being can ignore it.
And when you actually read the biology of a mosquito, when you zoom in on how it operates, it is terrifyingly complex.
It really is.
The material breaks down the anatomy, and we have to go through these details because they completely shatter the idea that this insect is just a simple random bug.
Let's do it.
First off, a single mosquito contains 4 distinct, highly sophisticated sensory laboratories.
4 laboratories in that tiny head.
Yes. It possesses a heat laboratory to detect the thermal signature of a warm-blooded host in pitch darkness. It has a tone or acoustic laboratory to detect subtle vibrations. It has a movement detecting laboratory and a light laboratory.
All of this sensory equipment is packed into a space the size of a pinhead.
And speaking of the head, the visual system alone is mind-boggling.
It has over 100 eyes.
100 eyes. And they aren't just simple light receptors. Each eye has a distinct lens connected to its microscopic brain via separate independent channels.
Structured perfectly like a honeycomb.
The raw processing power required to interpret 100 simultaneous visual inputs in a brain that's small defies our most advanced modern engineering capabilities.
We struggle to replicate that level of microprocessing with our best supercomputers.
But here is the part that had me pushing back from my desk in shock. The mouth.
Oh yeah, the biting mechanism.
When we think of a mosquito bite, we think of a single sharp needle poke, like a tiny syringe. But it's not a single needle.
A mosquito has exactly 48 teeth.
They have 48 teeth.
Yes.
I mean, we think of it as a needle, right?
Exactly, but it's like a tiny surgical team.
The lecture describes it literally like a team of surgeons. It uses these 48 teeth to saw into your skin like a microscopic scalpel.
But wait, if an insect is landing on your arm and sawing into your skin with 48 teeth, why don't you wake up screaming?
Right.
How does it manage to perform this surgery without us feeling it immediately?
Because it is also a miniature anesthesiologist.
It's incredible.
Before it even starts cutting with those teeth, it secretes a highly specific, localized anesthetic. It numbs the exact area of the incision.
But the biological wizardry gets even crazier.
Because of the blood.
Right, we all know basic human biology.
Yeah.
When you get a cut, your body's alarm system goes off. Blood naturally rushes to the area to defend the wound and form a clot, coagulation.
And if the blood coagulates, the mosquito's doomed. It can't drink solidifying blood, and it would clog its microscopic feeding tube.
So it has to somehow bypass the human immune defense system.
Right. So in addition to the anesthetic, it synthesizes and secretes an anticoagulant specifically designed to break down the human body's natural defense mechanism, keeping the blood thin and flowing.
A tiny insect inherently understands human hematology better than we did for most of our history.
It synthesizes complex chemical compounds on demand to neutralize the biological defenses of a host millions of times its size.
And once the blood is flowing, the sheer physics of its consumption is staggering.
The material notes that a mosquito can drink 8 times its own body weight in a matter of seconds.
To put that in human terms, that would be like an average adult human chugging 200 liters of water instantly.
And the mosquito does this without its stomach bursting, because its body is covered in specific sensory receptors designed to manage the intake and stretch.
And all this mechanical and chemical brilliance is powered by an engine that borders on the miraculous.
The wings. It flaps its wings 500 times a second.
500 times.
500 times a second, and it powers this insane movement using not one, but two lung-like hearts attached directly to the wings.
The speaker made a point that really drove the sheer force of this home for me.
Oh, about the human arms.
Yes. If human arms were attached to a machine that forced them to flap 500 times a second, the sheer kinetic force would instantly rip our arms completely out of their sockets.
Our joints would disintegrate into dust.
But the mosquito does it effortlessly, hovering right by your ear in the dark.
So when Musa tells Pharaoh that the rab gives everything its hillcat its fundamental nature and then guides it to fulfill that nature, this is precisely what he means.
The mosquito didn't attend medical school to invent its own anesthetic.
It didn't mathematically design a honeycomb 100 lens ocular system.
No, it was engineered with a supreme, terrifying precision to fulfill its specific role in the ecosystem.
What is that role? I have to play devil's advocate here.
Yisu.
Why did the master gardener, this loving rab, engineer this microscopic vampire? Because to us, they are just carriers of disease and annoyance.
Well, the lecture offers two philosophical purposes for the mosquito. The first is somewhat biological.
Okay.
Yes, Islamoğlu suggests they act as free cupping therapists, or hakamat, subtly cleaning the blood of ecosystems in ways we perhaps don't fully understand yet, acting as micro-regulators in the wild.
But the second purpose he offers is purely psychological, and I think it is absolutely brilliant.
It's my favorite part.
The mosquito serves as a divine wake-up call.
A reality check for the human ego.
Exactly. I want you, the listener, to picture this scenario. Imagine you have built a flawless paradise for yourself on Earth. You have the perfect climate-controlled house, a beautiful garden, all the wealth you could ever want, perfect health, total security.
You're living the absolute dream.
You are sitting there on your patio, completely content, thinking you have conquered the universe. You have reached the absolute peak of earthly pleasure and dominance. And suddenly,
a tiny, virtually invisible insect lands on your arm and bites you.
it instantly pierces the illusion of control.
It really does.
It is a divine messenger, engineered with 48 teeth and localized anesthetic, bypassing all your millions of dollars of security systems, your wealth, your massive ego, just to deliver a tiny drop of venom that makes you itch uncontrollably for 3 days.
It is the rab whispering to you, "Wake up, smart guy. This isn't paradise. You're looking in the wrong place."
If this earth was true heaven, if you were truly in control, mosquitoes wouldn't bite you.
It is a mass-distributed, humbling reminder that Earth is fundamentally flawed, deeply temporary, and entirely under the control of a higher power.
It shatters the Pharaoh complex in a single instant.
You simply cannot claim to be the absolute master of your domain if you can be brought to maddening, swatting irritation by an insect weighing 2 milligrams.
It is the ultimate cosmic humbling.
And it beautifully ties together everything we've explored in this deep dive today.
It really does circle back.
We started by looking at a statistical anomaly, a missing word in a traditional list, the word rab. We saw how the math and the grammar of the text demand that we recognize an intimate, nurturing force in the universe, rather than just a distant, retired creator.
We explored how forgetting that Rab leaves a power vacuum that leads to the destructive arrogance of Pharaoh, causing humanity to treat science and nature as absolute property to be abused rather than a sacred trust to be studied and preserved.
We completely reframed the problem of human suffering and discipline, whether through physical illness, the immense challenge of raising a disabled child, or even the grueling, willing training of an Olympic athlete.
We reframed it not as random, cruel punishment, but as the rigorous, sometimes painful pruning process of a master gardener bringing a soul to its ultimate eternal potential.
And finally, we zoomed all the way out to the nuclear fusion fires of the sun and all the way into the 48 teeth of a mosquito to see that every single atom, every star, and every insect is perfectly engineered and actively guided to fulfill its purpose by that exact same nurturer.
The concept of the Rab is not just a theological title in a dusty book. It is the active, vibrating, undeniable reality of the universe.
It's a completely transformative way to view existence.
So, to you listening, the next time you look at the natural world, or the next time you experience a profound hardship, or even just a minor irritating frustration, I want to challenge you.
Don't just look at the surface and ask, why is this random bad thing happening to me?
Pause and ask yourself, How is my rab trying to nurture, discipline, or guide me in this exact moment?
What is the unseen spiritual curriculum hidden inside this specific event?
Exactly. And I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over today. Something that really builds on this entire concept of divine engineering.
What is it?
If the mosquito's bite is perfectly biologically engineered, not just to feed the insect, but to serve as a highly specific, humbling reminder to humans that Earth is not a paradise, how might we reinterpret all the other everyday annoyances in our lives?
Oh, that is a profound question to take away.
What if the traffic jam that makes you late for a meeting, the spilled cup of coffee on your shirt, the Wi-Fi suddenly dropping out during an important call, or the sudden, unexpected rainstorm that ruins your plans? What if they aren't just random, chaotic bad luck?
What if they're deliberate?
What if every single minor inconvenience, every tiny pest in your day is actually a highly tailored, custom-engineered message from a nurturing rab?
A tiny, perfectly timed test of your patience.
Specifically designed to chip away at your ego and guide you toward a slightly higher level of spiritual maturity. Because if a 2-milligram mosquito is a mass-produced book sent to teach us humility, imagine what the rest of our daily struggles are desperately trying to say to us.
It fundamentally changes the entire landscape of daily life. The mundane becomes profoundly meaningful.
It really does. Thank you all so much for joining us on this incredibly expansive, mind-bending deep dive today. We hope it gives you a completely new lens through which to view the world, the ancient words you read, and even the buzzing insects in your backyard. Until next time, keep digging deeper.
This material is an in-depth theological lecture exploring the Islamic concept of the divine name, Rabb, focusing on its unique grammatical usage in the Quran, its meaning as the ultimate sustainer, and its implications for how humanity interacts with knowledge, suffering, and the natural world. So jumping right in, the extensive use of detailed scientific analogies risks overshadowing the central theological message of divine upbringing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the immediate challenge in the text right now is just the sheer volume of textbook data.
Oh, it's overwhelming.
It really is. We spend an immense amount of time detailing the biological intricacies of the mosquito. The text literally walks us through 4 separate sensory laboratories, the exact count of 48 teeth.
48 teeth?
Right? And then the highly specific mechanism of localized anesthesia. Oh, and the 500 wing beats per second.
It's a lot. And then immediately after that, we pivot to the astrophysical details of the sun?
Exactly. Dissecting the difference between nuclear and carbonic burning. And, while this data is undeniably fascinating, these highly detailed digressions completely disrupt the pacing.
Totally.
They just dilute the core theological focus on Rububiyet.
Right, and I think we should probably clarify how Rububiyet functions here, because the author's whole point actually rests on it.
Yeah, definitely.
It's that concept of active, continuous, divine upbringing and nurturing. It's not just about creating something and walking away. It's about sustaining it second by second.
Which is a beautiful concept.
It is, but the reader is highly likely to lose that spiritual thread while they're just, busy marveling at the textbook science. You start reading this profound theological argument about the nature of existence, and then, boom.
Boom. You're in AP biology.
Exactly. Suddenly it feels like you've been dropped into a hyper-granular, microscopic biology lecture on entomology.
Well, and the author's underlying intent is clearly to inspire awe, right?
Sure, of course.
They want to show that the sustainer is intimately involved in the absolute smallest details of creation. But the execution kind of misfires.
How so?
Because when you dedicate 2 full pages to the blood-clotting mechanisms and sensory receptors of a mosquito, the awe shifts entirely from the creator to the creature itself.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that makes sense.
The sheer volume of scientific data creates this massive cognitive load, and it actively blocks the spiritual reflection it's meant to provoke. The reader's brain is working so hard to process the mechanics of the insect's anatomy that there is literally no bandwidth left for the theology.
And I'd argue that mechanical focus actually creates an accidental contradiction within the author's own framework.
Oh, interesting. Say more about that.
Well, the overarching argument is heavily focused on differentiating Ilah, the initial creator, from Rabb, the active, nurturing sustainer.
Right.
But by focusing so intensely on the mechanical how of creation, like how the mosquito's heart operates or how the sun burns its specific fuel, the text accidentally frames God merely as an initial engineer.
Oh, I see what you mean.
It feels like we are looking at the initial blueprints of a machine, rather than the ongoing, active nurturing that defines the Rob.
Which inadvertently echoes the whole clockmaker god concept.
Yes.
And the text actively argues against that exact concept just a few pages earlier. If we just show the gears turning, we imply a god who wound the clock and just walked away.
Exactly.
So the fix here is to significantly streamline the scientific descriptions. I'd say cut the textbook data by about 60%.
I actually have to push back on cutting that much of it out.
Really? You don't think it's too much?
I think if you slash 60% of the science, you risk losing the visceral, awe-inspiring texture the author is clearly going for. The problem isn't necessarily the presence of the science, but the isolation of it.
Okay, so what's the alternative?
What if instead of just deleting it, we restructure it? It's like balancing flavors in a complex recipe. Right now, we have a giant bite of pure science, followed by a bite of pure theology. We need to interweave them so that the science actively serves the theology in the exact same sentence.
Oh, I see where you're going. It's about explicitly tethering every biological or cosmic fact directly back to the concept of the Rob guiding things to their ultimate purpose.
Yes, exactly.
Because the text uses these two great terms, hilkit and tesphia. It isn't just about creating something out of nowhere. It is about perfectly equipping it for its exact environment and purpose.
Right.
We need to move the reader from thinking, wow, look how complex this is, to realizing, look how this complexity serves a divinely nurtured purpose.
So practically speaking, instead of just listing all 4 sensory laboratories, the heart structure, and the 48 teeth in a vacuum, the text should highlight specifically how the numbing agent and the blood clotting mechanism demonstrate a sustainer equipping a creature for its specific survival purpose.
Right, show us the Tedbiryay, show us the active equipping.
Exactly. Connect the numbing agent to the concept of the rub, providing exactly what is needed for that creature to eat without being swatted.
I love that.
And then, immediately bridge this biological reality back to the human experience. If the mosquito is so intricately equipped by its rub just to survive, how are human beings equipped to thrive spiritually?
Oh, that's a beautiful bridge.
By making that explicit, the science doesn't compete with the theology, it illuminates it.
And we can apply that exact same interweaving to the sun analogy, too.
Definitely.
The text discusses the sun burning via nuclear processes rather than carbonic processes, so it doesn't run out of fuel. Instead of getting bogged down in, like, the chemistry of carbon chains, keep the focus sharply on the sustainer's foresight.
Right, it's about the provision.
Exactly. The Rob designed the sun's specific fuel source so it could sustain life on Earth for billions of years without exhausting itself. It is about that continuous, nurturing provision. If you restructure the sentences so that the theological implication is the main clause and the scientific fact is just the supporting clause, the pacing will completely transform.
That makes total sense. And we see a very similar tension when the text transitions from how God operates in nature to how humanity attempts to operate within nature.
Oh, the section on the history of science.
Yes. The argument contrasting modern scientific inquiry with divine reverence could be significantly strengthened by addressing potential counterexamples and avoiding absolutes.
It really could.
Right now, the text sets up this stark, almost unyielding binary. It claims that historical Islamic science treated knowledge as a sacred trust, or amanet, while modern Western science treats it strictly as property, or milkiyet.
Yeah, it's a very hard line.
And the text asserts that this property mindset inevitably leads to atomic bombs and biological weapons. This framing just feels incredibly rigid to me.
It is.
By painting with such a broad brush, the argument risks alienating critical thinkers who might view this as an oversimplification of a highly complex global endeavor.
The binary is definitely too sharp. And honestly, it creates a massive analytical vulnerability.
How so?
Because when you frame an argument as historical East equals pure reverence and modern West equals pure destruction, it begins to sound more like a cultural grievance than a universal theological truth.
That's a great way to put it.
The philosophical point here is actually brilliant, right? Knowledge becomes dangerous when it is stripped of spiritual responsibility. But the vehicle delivering that point is currently just too blunt. It completely overlooks the deep ethical frameworks that actually do exist in modern science.
I struggled with this section specifically because there is a glaring internal contradiction later in the material.
Oh, right, with the doctors.
Yes. A few chapters down, the author beautifully describes doctors as instruments of divine healing. The text says that the rab cures through the physician's hands, and that sometimes the doctor is even healed spiritually by the interaction with the patient.
It's a really moving section.
It is. But how does the author reconcile this profound respect for modern medicine with the earlier sweeping claim that modern science is entirely divorced from spiritual responsibility? I mean, modern medicine is the pinnacle of modern science.
Right. You can't really have it both ways without explaining the nuance. So the suggestion here is to nuance the argument by actively acknowledging modern ethical scientific endeavors.
Okay, yeah.
And frame the danger of destructive technology not merely as a geographical or quote-unquote Western issue, but as a universal human risk. You want to elevate the critique.
Elevate it past just the historical complaint.
Exactly. It shouldn't read as a regional historical complaint. It needs to be a timeless commentary on the human condition that occurs whenever knowledge is decoupled from spiritual humility.
But the shifting it to a universal human risk dilute the author's historical critique, though. Because the author seems very intent on pointing out a specific shift in how humanity viewed the world post-industrial revolution.
I don't think it dilutes it at all. I actually think it makes it philosophically bulletproof.
Okay, tell me how.
Well, you can still critique the industrial or modern shift, but you do it by focusing on the underlying spiritual failure, rather than just the geography or the era.
Right.
When discussing the contrast between imanet and mulkiyet, between knowledge as a trust versus knowledge as property, explicitly acknowledge that modern medicine cures diseases and saves millions of lives. Frame this medical success as a direct, modern manifestation of the Rub providing healing through human knowledge.
Oh, so you show that Emanet still exists today.
Yes, show that it still exists when humans act with humility. Then, reframe the creation of biological weapons or the atomic bomb, not as a blanket indictment of all modern science, but as the ultimate example of human hubris taking over.
You know, the author actually has the perfect motif for this earlier in the text.
Oh, which one?
The pharaoh.
Oh, right.
The text discusses how the pharaoh claimed to be Rab because he wanted ultimate control over his people and his environment. The irresponsible use of destructive technology is exactly that pharaonic hubris.
That is a fantastic connection.
It is the arrogance of treating knowledge as a property to rule over others, rather than a trust to nurture them. If the author likens the creators of biological weapons to that pharaonic mindset, it just ties the whole argument together perfectly.
It really does.
It stops being an attack on the West and becomes an attack on the timeless human temptation to play God.
And what I love about that is it invites the listener to examine their own relationship with knowledge, whether they are a scientist, a student, or just an everyday person doing their job.
Yeah, absolutely.
It basically asks the reader, do you treat your own expertise as a trust or as a property? That challenges the audience directly, rather than just asking them to nod along to a historical critique. It turns the concept of mulkiyet into a personal, ethical question.
And I feel like this naturally pushes us from the hubris of human action into the vulnerability of human suffering.
Yeah, that transition is a big one.
It is. And the transition into the discussion on severe human suffering and divine trials requires a more carefully modulated tone to maintain the piece's underlying empathy.
It's arguably the most delicate part of the whole text.
Truly. The vulnerability in this section stems from a direct comparison made between the intense, voluntary discipline of an Olympic athlete training for a worldly medal and involuntary human tragedies.
Right.
Specifically, they use the example of parents raising a child with severe disabilities. Now, the theological point being made is logically robust. I get it. Enduring hardship now leads to an eternal reward.
Yes, the logic tracks.
However, placing a sports analogy directly alongside profound, involuntary human grief comes across as, honestly, a bit insensitive.
It is a highly delicate balance to strike. The author is trying to visually demonstrate that pain can have a productive outcome, you know?
Sure.
The athlete breaking their body to achieve a gold medal is a very clear, understandable image of delayed gratification. It makes the abstract concept of eternal reward concrete.
Right. It's a useful visual.
But the emotional gap between choosing to wake up at 4 in the morning to run sprints and waking up at 4 in the morning to care for a terminally ill or severely disabled child, I mean, that is a massive chasm.
It's completely different.
One is an ambition. The other is a life-altering, unchosen trial. When the text puts them side by side without a buffer, it risks losing the trust of any listener who is actually in the midst of profound suffering.
I honestly think the structure of this argument needs to be reconsidered entirely.
You'd scrap it?
Well, comparing a parent's involuntary, heart-wrenching pain to an athlete's voluntary diet and training schedule borders on spiritual bootstrapping.
That's a strong term, but yeah.
It accidentally implies that if you just have the sheer willpower of an Olympian, your tragedy becomes manageable. It minimizes the very real, visceral trauma that the author is actively trying to contextualize.
Right.
It turns a profound mystery of divine will into a simple equation of human endurance.
I agree with the danger there. But I wouldn't throw the analogy out completely, though.
Really?
Yeah. The visual of delayed gratification is just too useful to discard. The fix is to soften this transition by clearly distinguishing between voluntary worldly discipline and involuntary divine trials. We have to ensure that deep empathy for human suffering remains the absolute focal point.
Okay, so how do we do that without losing the analogy?
It cannot be presented as a one-to-one equivalent. It has to be reordered and buffered.
So maybe before the athlete analogy is even introduced, the text must explicitly validate the profound, exhausting, and often isolating pain of the parents.
Yes. Start with empathy.
Acknowledge immediately that their struggle is not something they chose, which is exactly what makes their endurance infinitely more valuable than an athlete's.
Exactly.
Once that empathy is established, then you introduce the athlete's discipline not as a direct equivalent to grief, but as a much lesser, highly imperfect human mirror.
Exactly.
You frame it as a question of scale. You say, if we can understand an athlete volunteering for temporary pain for a simple piece of metal, how much more profound is the endurance of a parent carrying a burden they did not choose for an eternal reward?
Oh, that completely shifts it, right? This elevates the parents above the athlete, rather than flattening them to the same level. It acknowledges the fundamental difference between ambition and survival.
And to really ground this in the author's overall theology, this would actually be the perfect place to reintroduce the concept of the shefkat tukati.
Oh, the slap of compassion.
Yes, that was mentioned earlier in the text. It is such a stunning concept, this idea that a sudden hardship is actually a maternal, compassionate redirection from the Rab.
It's beautiful.
Use that concept here to remind the audience of the sustainer's underlying mercy and intimacy. Remind them that the slap comes from a figure of ultimate care, even in the darkest, most confusing trials.
And tying it back to the shefkat tukati reinforces the core definition of the Rab.
Exactly.
Because an ilah, a distant creator, might just observe human suffering from a distance. But the Rab, the active nurturer, is intimately present in the pain,
Right.
offering that compassionate correction or trial for ultimate spiritual growth. It brings the entire theological argument full circle. It proves that the sustainer is just as present in a family's grief as he is in the complex biology of the mosquito or the burning of the sun.
It grounds the high-level theology in deep, resonant human empathy.
It really does.
Well, when you step back and look at all these elements together, whether we are talking about the biology of an insect, the ethics of modern science, or the pain of a grieving parent, the underlying solution is exactly the same.
Keep the focus on the sustainer.
Exactly. The writer needs to ensure that the mechanics of the world never distract from the sustainer of it by interweaving the science with immediate theological purpose, by nuancing the historical critique into a universal lesson on hubris, and by placing profound empathy ahead of logical analogies. This material will resonate on a much, much deeper level.
We absolutely love the ambition and the intellectual depth of this material. Exploring the octave, continuous nurturing of the Rab is a massive undertaking, and the foundation here is incredibly strong. We warmly invite you to implement these structural and tonal adjustments and submit your revised work back to us for further exploration.
It is all too easy to get lost in the intricate mechanics of a mosquito's wings, or the sheer heat of the sun, or even the logical puzzles of human suffering. But as you refine this piece, remember to keep pulling your audience out of the weeds of the mechanics and gently guide them back to that central, awe-inspiring truth you are trying to show them.
Welcome to the debate. So imagine you are handed this master key to an infinitely vast, unimaginably complex estate.
Okay.
And this key unlocks every door. It reveals every mechanical room, and it essentially grants you access to the deepest vaults of knowledge about exactly how the estate functions.
Right, it sounds like the ultimate prize.
Exactly. Most people today would view that key as a tool of ultimate power, like a title deed of ownership. But what if the key was actually a contract? What if every door you opened didn't just offer you a new room to exploit, but actively demanded that you maintain it, nurture it, and submit to the rules of the architect who built it?
Well, the problem, of course, is that human beings desperately want the key, but we absolutely despise the contract. I mean, we love marveling at the architecture. We just hate the architect telling us how we are supposed to live inside the house.
We really do. And today, we are examining one of the most profound conceptual tensions in Islamic theology, which is a tension centered entirely around a single, overwhelmingly prevalent word in the source material, which is Rabb.
Right. Usually translated as Lord or sustainer or nurturer.
Yes, and the sheer statistical weight of this term is staggering. I mean, it appears 962 times in the Quran. That makes it second only to the proper name Allah, which appears 2,697 times. But our focus today isn't just on the frequency of the word. It's on the profound crisis it provokes in the human condition.
And it really is a crisis. The core disagreement we are exploring today is how to fundamentally understand the human rejection of this concept of the Rabb. Like, why do we push back against it so fiercely?
Precisely. So the central question is this: does the rejection of the Rabb primarily manifest as an epistemological crisis? Meaning, is it a failure of how we view knowledge and nature, where we treat the universe as mere property to be exploited rather than a divine trust?
Okay, and I assume you're taking the side of the epistemological crisis.
I am. I will argue that Rabb is fundamentally a teleological framework of purposeful design. It is a blueprint, essentially. And our ultimate transgression is abandoning our role as the intellectual stewards of that design.
Got it. And I will argue that Rabb represents an active, authoritative, and often deeply painful disciplinary force, what is known in the tradition as Tedbiryay.
Right.
From my perspective, humanity's core struggle isn't some failure of scientific stewardship. It is an existential, deeply ingrained arrogance. It's our absolute refusal to submit to the rigorous, humbling trials that are necessary for our spiritual maturity. We don't just misunderstand the blueprint, we are actively allergic to divine authority.
Well, I think the best way to understand my position is to look at the trajectory of human knowledge.
Okay, let's hear it.
When we examine the historical golden ages of science, whether we're talking about the scholars in Andalusia or the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, the observatories in Samarkand, Islamabad, they didn't just produce empirical data.
Right, they had a whole philosophy behind it.
Exactly. They flourished precisely because they viewed nature through the epistemological compass of a Rabb. They operated under the paradigm that the laws of nature are a divine trust, an emanat.
An emanat, yeah.
And when you approach the universe as an emanat, the scientist is not an owner conquering nature. The scientist is deciphering a purposeful creation. You are basically reading a text written by an ultimate sustainer.
Okay, but how does that explain the rejection of the concept today?
Because you have to examine what happens when humanity shifts away from that framework. When we sever our pursuit of knowledge from the concept of a sustainer, we undergo a massive psychological shift. We start treating knowledge and nature as sheer property, as milkyads.
I see.
And this isn't just a philosophical misstep. It changes the entire trajectory of civilization. Treating knowledge as your absolute property removes the moral guardrails.
It removes the accountability.
Exactly. It gives you the ethical justification to split the atom, not to understand the fabric of reality, but to build atomic bombs. It allows you to genetically engineer insects that can destroy entire ecosystems or develop biological weapons specifically designed for mass population wipeouts.
That is a dark turn.
It is. The crisis of rejecting the Rabb
is the crisis of unmoored destructive science. When we lose the sustainer, we basically become the destroyers.
Well, I come at it from a different way. I mean, the crisis you're describing, the slide into destructive science, is just a symptom.
Just a symptom?
Yeah. The root cause isn't a failure to view nature as a trust. It's the human ego's absolute, uncompromising allergy to divine intervention. Look back at antiquity.
Okay.
Ancient civilizations like Greece or Egypt, they had very little problem conceptualizing a supreme creator. The idea of a prime mover who, winds up the clock of the universe and then steps back into the shadows, that is actually highly appealing to the human ego.
Because a retired god doesn't make demands on your daily life.
Exactly. A sun god doesn't tell you how to treat your neighbor or how to run your economy. So they accepted a creator, but they fiercely rejected the Rub, because the Rub actively disciplines.
Right, the Tedbiryay aspect.
Yes. Think about the story of Pharaoh. When Pharaoh stood up in front of his people and declared, "I am your greatest Rub," he wasn't suffering from the delusion that he physically created the heavens and the earth.
No, he knew he was just a guy.
Right, he knew he was a mortal man, and his subjects knew he was a mortal man. So what was he actually claiming? He was demanding absolute earthly dominion. He wanted a monopoly on the rules.
He wanted to be the ultimate authority.
Precisely. He was saying, "I am the ultimate legislative and disciplinary authority in your lives." He was usurping the authority of the rat because he despised the idea of being governed by a higher power. This is an existential rebellion. It's not an epistemological failure to appreciate nature's design.
Well, I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on how design itself actually dictates that authority.
Okay, go ahead.
You're drawing a hard line between physical design and authority, but they are deeply intertwined. The staggering complexity of creation isn't just a passive painting on a wall that we observe.
Right.
Intellectual humility. Take the sun, for example. The sun doesn't burn like a massive campfire. It burns through stable, incredibly slow nuclear fusion, as opposed to the rapid carbon combustion that defines fire here on Earth.
Sure. The physics of it are incredible.
Right. And because of this highly specific, delicately balanced mechanism, the sun has consumed only about 1 in 3 billion parts of its mass since its birth.
Wow.
It has been generating life-sustaining energy for billions of years without rapidly shrinking or exploding into a supernova. Now, when you confront a physical reality of that scale and precision, it forces an intellectual paradigm shift.
How so?
It tells you that the universe is not a chaotic accident of physics to be hacked. It's a deliberate design. Treating nature as mere property instead of a divine trust is like a brilliant surgeon using their deep anatomical knowledge to interrogate and torture a patient rather than heal them.
That is a heavy analogy.
But it fits. The sheer scale of this purposeful design, this Hillcot, is fundamentally a call for intellectual stewardship. How can you look at that and say it isn't primarily about aligning our human knowledge with a divine blueprint?
Because, well, you're looking at the universe from a very safe, astronomical distance. Safe?
Yeah. It's easy to admire a blueprint when it's millions of miles away, quietly generating warmth for you. You're looking at the sun. I want to look at something much closer to home. Let's look at the mosquito. Wait, a mosquito? You're going to counter the awe-inspiring nuclear fusion of a star with an insect that breeds in stagnant water?
I absolutely am.
How does an annoyance compare to a cosmic blueprint?
Because it completely flips your idea of passive admiration on its head. A mosquito isn't just a marvel of design. It is a microscopic surgical strike on human arrogance.
Okay, explain that.
Let's look at the mechanics of it. The mosquito possesses 4 distinct laboratories to track its prey. It tracks heat, tone, movement, and light.
4 distinct ways to find us.
Exactly. It has over 100 microscopic eyes, each with a lens connected to its brain. But think about the actual mechanism of its bite. Before it even breaks your skin, it secretes a localized anesthetic.
Oh, right, so we don't feel it right away.
And you'd squash it instantly. It is biologically engineered to completely bypass our human defense mechanisms.
That is terrifyingly precise.
Right? At the same time, it introduces an anticoagulant, so your blood doesn't clot while it feeds. and it drinks 8 times its body weight in blood in a matter of seconds.
8 times its body weight?
Yeah, if a human did that, it would be like drinking 200 liters of liquid in a single sitting without your stomach rupturing. And it's doing all of this while beating its wings 500 times a second, powered by 2 lung-like hearts.
Okay, well, the biological engineering there is undeniable. But, I mean, it perfectly reinforces my point about the depth of the eminent, the trust of knowledge.
How does it reinforce your point?
Because that kind of microscopic precision is exactly why we need to act as intellectual stewards, realizing how intricately life is woven together.
But you're missing why it's interacting with you in the first place. The mosquito doesn't exist just to sit under a microscope so we can marvel at its plumbing and write scientific papers about it.
Then why does it exist?
It exists as an active, irritating, disciplinary tool. Imagine you have built your perfect paradise. You are at the absolute height of worldly pleasure, reclining in your wealth and comfort.
Feeling like a god on earth.
Completely untouchable.
Okay.
And then a mosquito lands on you. It bypasses all your wealth, all your technology, and it bites you. It bites you to remind you you are wrong, you are vulnerable, this is not heaven.
A biological reality check.
Exactly. It shatters the illusion of human supremacy with a tiny, itchy welt. Nature isn't just sitting there waiting to be studied by your noble scientists. It is actively disciplining us. It is shaking us awake.
That's a really interesting point, though. I would frame it differently. You're viewing that interaction purely through the lens of disruption and punishment.
Well, it is disruptive.
True, but the concept of Rububiyet, of lordship, actually invites us into a profound, intimate harmony. It's not just a wake-up call meant to irritate us, it's an integration. Look closely at the linguistic architecture of the text itself.
Okay, let's look at the text. There is a brilliant grammatical anomaly that speaks exactly to this intimacy. The word Rob never appears in the Quran with the definite article L.
Meaning it's never just the Rob. Exactly. You never see the Rab used as some distant, abstract, detached noun. Instead, it appears over 240 times as a possessive, a muzaf.
Like a personal attachment.
Right! It is always my Rob, your Rob, our Rob.
I would argue that's because the authority is deeply personal. It's applied directly to you, demanding your submission.
But I see it as requiring an intimate adoption. It's an epistemological lens. God is saying, internalize my lordship. Humanity is meant to wear this divine guidance almost like a garment.
A garment?
Yes, because when you truly internalize the concept of your Rab, the divine will, transforms your very faculties. You begin to see, hear, and think as a harmonious extension of that divine purpose.
I see where you're going with this.
Right? It ceases to be this external discipline that you're constantly fighting against, and it becomes an internal compass. You love through the divine. You observe the laws of physics and biology through the divine. That intimacy, that alignment of our intellect with the Creator's intent is the true core of stewardship.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that.
Why not?
Let me tell you why. You are making tarbiyah, this deeply demanding process of divine nurturing and discipline, sound like slipping into a warm, comfortable bath of intellectual enlightenment.
Well, harmony can be comfortable.
But true nurturing is inherently grueling. It actively shatters our illusion of control. The intimacy you're talking about isn't a soft garment, it is a crucible.
A crucible.
Yes.
Let's ground this in the human psychology of hardship. Think about the concept of the compassionate slap of a mother. When a child is about to run into traffic, a mother might slap their hand or physically pull them back so hard it hurts.
To save their life?
Exactly. The child cries from the pain, but who do they run back to for comfort? The mother. The very source of the pain is recognized as the ultimate source of safety. That is the mechanism of divine discipline.
But that still operates within a framework of recognizing the ultimate purpose of the pain. The child eventually has an intellectual recognition of the safety.
I'd argue it is about visceral endurance, not just intellectual recognition. Think about a much harder reality. Parents who are given a profoundly disabled child. We often struggle to contextualize that kind of suffering.
We do, yes. But framing it through Tedbiryay, it is not a punishment. It is an immense, grueling trial that forces profound psychological and spiritual endurance. It requires parents to accept a reality they did not choose, cannot control, and must navigate every single day. It's a tremendous burden.
It is, and it is framed as a key to heaven for those parents. But unlocking that door requires them to be shattered and rebuilt. That is the Rab at work.
I see. And if you want a parallel that grounds this perfectly in human ambition, look at Olympic athletes. An athlete will willingly subject themselves to excruciating, agonizing discipline.
Oh, sure. The physical toll is insane.
They train 6 to 12 hours a day. They deny themselves the food they want to eat. They sacrifice their social lives and their freedom. They push their bodies to the absolute breaking point, destroying their joints, sweating and bleeding for years.
For a chance at gold.
For a piece of metal. A worldly metal that will eventually tarnish in a record book that will eventually be forgotten. If humans can willingly endure that kind of agonizing discipline for a temporary, fleeting reward, how can we complain when the Rab puts us through grueling trials for an eternal one?
That's a fair point.
The intimacy of the Rab is forged in the fire of endurance, not just the harmony of intellectual study.
Okay, but I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning, because you are focusing entirely on the symptom, the suffering itself, rather than the root cause of why humanity struggles so much with this concept in the first place.
You think there's a deeper root cause?
I do. If we zoom out and look at the historical and textual evidence, we see a profound human failure to conceptualize this authority properly.
Go on.
Read in the name of your Rab, and it is in the final surah, say, I seek refuge in the Rab of mankind. It is the alpha and the omega of the text. It's completely inescapable in the text, yes. But historically, humanity has demonstrated a massive, deeply revealing blind spot to it.
A blind spot?
Yes. If you look at the compilation of the 99 names of Allah, specifically the two most famous, historically widespread lists compiled by Tirmidhi and Ibn Majah, there is a glaring omission.
Wait, is it?
The name Rab is mysteriously absent from both lists.
It is a fascinating historical reality, but I draw a very different conclusion from it than you do.
Well, think about the psychological diagnosis here. You have a word that appears 962 times in the central text, a word that defines the relationship between the creator and the created.
Right.
Yet human compilers, when tasked with creating the definitive list of divine attributes to memorize, to recite, and to hang on their walls, completely omitted it. Why?
Why do you think?
It's a subconscious defense mechanism. Acknowledging the Rab means acknowledging the amanat, the trust. It means you can no longer view the world, your wealth, or your scientific discoveries as your absolute property.
So we just conveniently left it out?
Exactly. We left it off those lists because we subconsciously wanted a God we could praise without a God who demands stewardship over our actions and our science. It is an epistemological evasion. We want the blessings of the estate without the contract.
I disagree entirely with that diagnosis.
Entirely?
Yes. It's not a subconscious blind spot. It is active, conscious defiance. You think people forgot the word because they didn't want to be good stewards of nature? I think they avoid the word because they hate submitting. And the text itself proves this through its deeply specific use of the vocative.
The vocative? You mean calling out?
Yes. Think about the phrase, Ya Rab, calling out, O Lord. Out of the 962 times the word Rab is used in the Quran, how many times do you think the phrase Ya Rab appears?
I actually don't know the exact number.
Only twice. Specifically in Surah Furqan, verse 30, and Surah Zuhruf, verse 88. And both times it is used by the prophet in a context of deep, anguished complaint about the afterlife, lamenting the state of his people.
Okay, but why does that specific grammatical limitation matter so much to your point?
Because of how the word ya functions. Use ya-o to wake someone up or to get the attention of someone who is far away.
Right, to bridge a distance.
Exactly. God doesn't need to be called with a distant ya because he doesn't sleep and he isn't far. He is closer than the jugular vein. The distance isn't on his end, it's on ours. We use the ya because we have created the distance.
That is a very powerful linguistic point.
And the complaint in Furqan 30 is incredibly specific. It says, humanity has left the Quran mahjura.
Meaning abandoned.
Right, but that doesn't mean unread. It means functionless, abandoned in practice. We will kiss the physical book. We will recite it with absolutely perfect pronunciation. We will hang those 99 names on the wall in beautiful calligraphy.
But we reject the core message.
We refuse to carry the heavy, crushing responsibility of its discipline. It's not that we don't understand the complex design of the universe. It's that we refuse to let the Rab design us. We want the prestige of religion without the agonizing turbia of spiritual growth.
But, that brings us right back to the core of the teleological argument. When you refuse to let the Rab design you, you fundamentally misunderstand your place in the universe.
Well,
you are rejecting the blueprint entirely. If I can summarize my position in light of our discussion today, recognizing the Rab means respecting the divine trust, the eminent, embedded in the purposeful design of the universe.
Right.
Whether we are looking at the delicate nuclear fusion of the sun or the complex biology of a single cell, seeing the Rab is the ultimate and perhaps the only defense against the destructive exploitation of knowledge. Without that epistemological framework, we inevitably turn our brilliance toward our own annihilation.
And from my perspective, looking at the universe's design is only step one. The Rab is primarily an active, authoritative force of discipline.
The crucible, as you called it.
Yes, it is the mosquito that bites your ego. It is the agonizing trial that tests your patience. Recognizing the Rab requires humans to humble themselves, to stop playing Pharaoh in their own lives, and to endure profound earthly trials to achieve true spiritual maturity. You cannot simply think your way to the Rab. You have to endure your way there.
Yet, despite our different framing, I think we converge on a crucial point today.
I think so too.
The source material makes it undeniably clear that humanity has to move past a passive, comfortable acknowledgement of a distant creator. We are forced to actively grapple with a universe that demands something highly specific and often very difficult from us.
Agreed. Whether it is demanding intellectual stewardship of the earth or the painful discipline of the human soul, the universe is not neutral. It is actively calling us out.
And looking at these divine attributes through both lenses, the lens of scientific intellectual stewardship and the lens of personal existential endurance, reveals a staggering depth to the material.
It really does.
There is so much more to explore here, from the profound psychological shifts of the Islamic Golden Ages to the intricate biological mechanisms hidden in the smallest creatures, all pointing back to this single, monumental concept.
It certainly leaves us with a lot to chew on.
It does.
We started this discussion talking about a master key, a key that unlocks the vast estate of the universe, but comes with a binding contract of stewardship and discipline.
Right.
The question the material leaves us with isn't whether the key exists, or even whether it works. The question is, when you finally hold that key in your hand, and you realize the agonizing weight of the responsibility it demands, do you have the courage to turn the lock?
This is the brief on the Quranic concept of Rab. So, we're breaking down the lecture by Mustafa İslamoğlu today to see how unlocking just this one single word totally shifts how we view the creator, science, and, well, the entire universe. First, let's look at the sheer scale of this word. Popping up 962 times, Rab is actually the first and last divine attribute mentioned in the entire Quran. It doesn't just mean Lord. It describes a sustainer who equips absolutely everything with a specific purpose. Think of a master engineer. They don't just build a machine and walk away, right? They actively program and power every single gear. That is why the sun burns via nuclear combustion, and the tiny mosquito has exactly 48 teeth and anesthetic saliva. Second, the grammar reveals something incredibly intimate. In the text, Rab is literally never paired with the word the. Instead, it's exclusively possessive, phrased as my Rab or your Rab. It's a direct invitation to adopt that relationship personally. It's way less like a distant monarch and way more like a personal mentor. Because if you don't claim him as yours, how can that guidance really manifest in you? Finally, look at the disaster of rejecting the true Rab. The ancient pharaoh didn't claim he created the world. He just claimed to be its Rab, to demand absolute control. Today, viewing scientific knowledge as absolute ownership rather than a divine trust leads to destructive arrogance, like atomic bombs. We're acting like arrogant tenants who just decided we own the building, completely forgetting the actual landlord. Ultimately, embracing Rob means recognizing that every atom has a divine purpose, and human knowledge is a sacred trust meant to nurture life, not destroy it. This is the brief on the Quranic concept of Rab. So, we're breaking down the lecture by Mustafa İslamoğlu today to see how unlocking just this one single word totally shifts how we view the creator, science, and, well, the entire universe. First, let's look at the sheer scale of this word. Popping up 962 times, Rab is actually the first and last divine attribute mentioned in the entire Quran. It doesn't just mean Lord, it describes a sustainer who equips absolutely everything with a specific purpose. Think of a master engineer. They don't just build a machine and walk away, right? They actively program and power every single gear. That is why the sun burns via nuclear combustion, and the tiny mosquito has exactly 48 teeth and anesthetic saliva. Second, the grammar reveals something incredibly intimate. In the text, Rab is literally never paired with the word the. Instead, it's exclusively possessive, phrased as my Rab or your Rab. It's a direct invitation to adopt that relationship personally. It's way less like a distant monarch and way more like a personal mentor. Because if you don't claim him as yours, how can that guidance really manifest in you? Finally, look at the disaster of rejecting the true Rab. The ancient pharaoh didn't claim he created the world. He just claimed to be its Rab, to demand absolute control. Today, viewing scientific knowledge as absolute ownership rather than a divine trust leads to destructive arrogance, like atomic bombs. We're acting like arrogant tenants who just decided we own the building, completely forgetting the actual landlord. Ultimately, embracing Rab means recognizing that every atom has a divine purpose, and human knowledge is a sacred trust meant to nurture life, not destroy it. This is the brief on the Quranic concept of Rab. So, we're breaking down the lecture by Mustafa İslamoğlu today to see how unlocking just this one single word totally shifts how we view the creator, science, and, well, the entire universe. First, let's look at the sheer scale of this word. Popping up 962 times, Rab is actually the first and last divine attribute mentioned in the entire Quran. It doesn't just mean Lord, it describes a sustainer who equips absolutely everything with a specific purpose. Think of a master engineer. They don't just build a machine and walk away, right? They actively program and power every single gear. That is why the sun burns via nuclear combustion, and the tiny mosquito has exactly 48 teeth and anesthetic saliva. Second, the grammar reveals something incredibly intimate. In the text, Rab is literally never paired with the word the. Instead, it's exclusively possessive, phrased as my Rab or your Rab. It's a direct invitation to adopt that relationship personally. It's way less like a distant monarch and way more like a personal mentor. Because if you don't claim him as yours, how can that guidance really manifest in you? Finally, look at the disaster of rejecting the true Rab. The ancient pharaoh didn't claim he created the world. He just claimed to be its Rab, to demand absolute control. Today, viewing scientific knowledge as absolute ownership rather than a divine trust leads to destructive arrogance, like atomic bombs. We're acting like arrogant tenants who just decided we own the building, completely forgetting the actual landlord. Ultimately, embracing Rab means recognizing that every atom has a divine purpose, and human knowledge is a sacred trust meant to nurture life, not destroy it.